who nearly, we should say, 1 year ago today wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, "It's Time to Open New York's Offices," related, of course, one of the largest landlords in New York. So, Jeff, a year later, in your mind, given the stats we just heard, where are we?
Well, good morning, Andrew. Well, I certainly agree. New York is not dead, and I think it's coming back, and I think it'll be back better than ever. So most of the stats you talked about were about people coming back to the office, and while we are today about 23-25% occupied in the offices, that doesn't mean that you're 23-25% leased. These units are leased to large companies. We do expect them to be back in the office. We expected them to be back in the office right after Labor Day. I do think with Delta, it's going to be pushed back a little bit, but people want to come back to New York. You know, the flight to Florida, the flight to different cities, I think is temporary. We're already seeing people come back today. We're signing leases quickly here at Hudson Yards. We just signed Coinbase, welcome them as a tenant at Hudson Yards. There are lots of companies that did well during the pandemic and will actually be back in their offices. And we hope as this Delta kind of passes through here, they'll be returning, as quick as possible. Schools are starting. People will be in masks. Schools are starting. That'll bring a lot of people back to the city. But clearly that article that New York was dead was certainly not true.
Jeff, perhaps counterintuitively, there has been an argument that perhaps big companies will end up renting and leasing even more space to account for sort of a new work environment. I'm curious if you're seeing that, and also what kind of reconfigurations you're starting to see, if there are any, around moving from either open floor plans to other kinds of environments where people either are going to feel safer, or because the work space itself is going to change because people are going to use it to come together, but maybe they're going to therefore work from home a couple of days a week. How you think that's starting to shake out?
Well, I certainly do think people are going to be taking more space. We've already seen it here. Almost every one of our companies at Hudson Yards is expanding today. So that is definitely true. We haven't quite seen the modifications yet, just because I think time hasn't passed, but I think you will see more gathering spaces. I do think there'll be flexibility in the workplace. People might work, partial week, partial at home, and the office spaces will be a place for people to get together and gather. And as new spaces get built out, I think you will see some of those changes in the physical office space. But I don't think it will decrease the total amount of square footages that companies have, because if someone works home on Friday, they still need office space, for the rest of the week. So right. I don't really expect a huge decrease in the total square footage.
What are you having to do during this period? And I wonder whether you're still having to do it. I know a lot of landlords are ultimately subsidizing some of the services in the business inside these buildings, restaurants and the like, and others, to try to keep them in business during this period. And when you think some of that subsidies or other things might shift?
So certainly the restaurants were the hardest hit as we made our way through this pandemic. But as you know, it's not that easy to get a reservation in New York these days. So restaurants are back and crowded. And so most of those subsidies or free rents have passed. The biggest problem in the restaurants right now is getting workers. They haven't been able to restaff. And so as a result, whether it's lunch or certain days, these restaurants can't stay open. So we're hoping as some of the subsidies burn off for workers to stay home, that they'll actually be able to rehire and retrain workers, because that's really what we need. We need the restaurants back open. They are back and able to pay rent. The demand is certainly there today.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.